Winter rode in on a hush of white, settling over the little Wyoming station, like a tired angel folding its wings for a while. Snow drifted slow and soft, each flake a wandering ghost passing through the dim amber glow of the platform lanterns. Eleanor Whitfield stepped down from the train with the careful grace of someone who had learned not to disturb the world more than she must. Her boots sank into the powder, and her breath trembled into the cold like a quiet confession she wished no one would hear. She stood for a moment, letting the sting of winter anchor her nerves. 50 winters had shaped her, brushing silver through her hair until it shone like moonlight over old water. She wore a dark wool coat, neatly mended, the kind worn by women who knew the worth of small repair. Her gloved hands tightened around the handle of her single brown suitcase, the one she had packed with hope more than belongings. This was supposed to be her beginning, her last chance at a life shared with another heartbeat. Nathaniel Briggs had written to her for months, promising warmth, promising steadiness, promising companionship for the years still waiting to be lived. His letters spoke of gentle evenings and open horizons, and Eleanor had let her lonely heart believe him. She had let herself dream a little. Now the dream quivered with the cold. The wooden station door creaked open, spilling a wedge of lamplight. A woman stepped out, Beatrice Cobb, the postmistress, wrapped in her heavy shawl. Her sharp eyes flicked immediately to Eleanor, taking her in from white hair to weathered boots. Not unkind, but appraising. "So you're the bride," she said, though she didn't use the word bride the way it was meant to sound. It came out dry, like a leaf cracking under ice. Eleanor offered a small smile, polite, practiced. "I am." Beatrice nodded, but her gaze lingered on the silver in Eleanor's hair, with a faint wrinkle of doubt. She motioned toward the road. "Nathaniel should be along soon. Town's a little stirred, he's bringing someone." Eleanor murmured her thanks, though her heart tightened. Change. That was all she had left. For a moment she watched her breath fade into the dusk. Then she heard footsteps crunching across the snow. Nathaniel approached with a stiff posture, his coat buttoned to the throat, his hat pulled low as if shielding his eyes from what he didn't wish to see. When he stopped before her, he lifted his gaze, and Eleanor felt the moment he measured her. Not the way a man looks at another soul. No, he looked the way a merchant examines a shipment and finds it lacking. "You're older than I expected," he said, voice tight as a knot pulled wrong. The words struck softly but deeply. Eleanor steadied herself. His letters, she tried to recall them now, had spoken of loneliness, of wanting steady company. They had not promised youth. But she saw the truth behind his strained expression. The town had whispered to him, fed him doubts, and he was a man who bent easily beneath opinion. "I'm sorry if I've misled you," Eleanor said quietly. "I was honest in my letters." Nathaniel shifted, breath puffing in quick bursts. "I thought, well," Beatrice said, his voice dropped. "I need someone who can help with the store. Someone, stronger." There it was. Stronger meant younger. Younger meant someone who made him look good in the eyes of the town. Eleanor felt the cold sharper now, sneaking past her coat and into her ribs. "I see," she whispered. Nathaniel took a half step back, as though distance might soften guilt. "I'll see that you get a room for the night. Tomorrow you can decide what comes next." What comes next? The words felt like a door shutting. He nodded once, then hurried away, boots crunching fast as if fleeing something shameful. Eleanor didn't move. She simply stood there while the last light of day slipped behind the hills. Her suitcase sat beside her like a loyal companion, waiting for a command she didn't have the strength to give. The platform emptied. Beatrice disappeared inside. The train hissed once and pulled away, leaving the world quiet. And then, when the silence was almost heavy enough to bow her shoulders, Eleanor sensed someone watching her. She turned slowly. At the far end of the platform, half shadowed beneath the lantern, stood a man built like the trunk of an ancient pine. Tall, broad, wrapped in a dark coat lined with fur. His long hair, black as raven wings, fell over his shoulders, and his face, carved with strength, softened with thought, held no judgment. Only stillness. Tahoma. She did not know his name yet, but she felt something unmistakable. He had seen everything. The rejection. The sting. the quiet dignity she tried so hard to maintain. And yet his eyes, dark as earth after rain, held neither pity nor curiosity. He simply looked at her as though she were not something discarded, but something enduring. A gust of wind swept between them, carrying the faint scent of pine and stone. Eleanor shivered. Her suitcase tipped slightly, the handle slipping from her tired fingers. Tahoma stepped forward. Not quickly, not boldly, but with the slow certainty of a man who had carried heavy things all his life and knew when someone else needed steadiness. He reached her suitcase, lifted it with one hand, and set it upright again. He didn't speak. Something in his quiet presence steadied her, as though the storm around her paused to listen for a trembling moment. The lantern flickered, and for a heartbeat she saw something gentle move behind his stern expression. The snow kept falling, soft and endless, as if the night itself held its breath between them. And Eleanor, fragile in the aftershock of rejection, felt the smallest shift inside her chest, like the beginning of warmth finding its way back into a place winter had ruled for too long there. Snow whispered over the platform as Eleanor gathered what remained of her composure, though her breath still trembled with the weight of Nathaniel's rejection. She kept her gaze lowered, afraid the softness in her eyes might betray the crack in her spirit. Yet the presence beside her, tall, quiet, unmoving, anchored her in a way she had not expected. The man who had righted her suitcase did not speak, did not intrude. He stood like a pillar carved from winter stone, offering steadiness without asking anything in return. Eleanor finally lifted her eyes to him. He seemed younger than she had first noticed, perhaps in his early 30s, though the stillness in his posture carried decades of patient endurance. His coat, fashioned from heavy hide lined with fur, bore the marks of work and weather. Long strands of raven-black hair brushed his shoulders, stirring gently with each passing gust. His skin carried the warm earth tones of the Apache people, though his expression held none of the sharp suspicion she had sometimes heard townsfolk whisper about. His face was unreadable in a way that did not threaten, it merely observed. "Are you all right?" his voice seemed to ask, though he had spoken no words. The quiet stretched between them like a soft blanket thrown over the cold. Eleanor, humbled by the purity of the moment, pressed her hand to her chest. "I'm simply catching my breath," she murmured. He inclined his head, as though acknowledging both her strength and her wound. For a heartbeat, she thought he might turn away and leave her to the night. Instead, he stepped closer, enough that she could feel the steady warmth radiating from him. He lifted one gloved hand, not touching, only gesturing gently toward the road leading into town, where the snow deepened and shadows stretched long. "You shouldn't stand in the cold," he said at last, his voice low, carrying the cadence of someone who chose his words with care. "The night grows harsher after sundown." His tone held no demand, only an invitation laced with quiet concern. Eleanor swallowed, unsure how to receive kindness from a stranger, when the man she had crossed states to marry could not spare even compassion. "I don't know where to go," she admitted softly. "Nathaniel said she hesitated, that he'd arrange a room for the night." A flicker of understanding moved across the man's features, subtle, almost invisible, like wind shifting through tall grass. He did not ask for details. He did not pry. He merely turned his head, glancing toward the cluster of lights that marked the town's edge. "The inn is crowded. Rooms full with travelers. You would not find rest there tonight." His certainty surprised her. She realized he must know the town well, perhaps better than those who claimed dominion over it. Her fingers tightened around the handle of her suitcase. "I see." He studied her for a moment longer. Snow gathered lightly on his hair, catching the lantern glow like scattered stars. Then, quietly, he said, "You can come with me. My cabin is warm. It is not far." Eleanor felt the words like a sudden gust, unexpected, startling, yet not unkind. She hesitated instinctively, trained by years of caution, by decades of being told what a woman should or should not do. Go with a strange man? Even one who seemed carved from patience itself? It was unthinkable. Yet the alternative, wandering into a town whispering her failure, searching for a bed that did not exist, felt heavier still. She lifted her chin. "I don't wish to impose." "You wouldn't," he replied simply. "I have space." He did not look away. His eyes held a warmth not easily kindled, an ember buried deep beneath winter layers. Eleanor felt it reach her, felt it remind her that kindness still existed in the world, if only in hidden corners. Before she could respond, the station door opened again. Little Sam Carter, the stable boy with wind-stung cheeks and a mop of brown curls, bounded out, a blanket tucked under one arm. He skidded to a halt when he saw her. "Miss," he said, breathless, "Mr. Briggs told me to come check if you were still here." He said. "Well," Sam's face flushed. "He said he'll send word in the morning." Eleanor's heart sank. Nathaniel had sent a child instead of facing her again. The small humiliation stung sharper than the cold. Sam's eyes flicked to the tall man beside her, and a bright grin broke across his face. "Evening, Tahoma." "Tahoma," Eleanor repeated silently, letting the name settle. The man, Tahoma, nodded to the boy. Sam turned back to Eleanor, oblivious to the heaviness around her. "Ma says the storm will get worse before midnight. Maybe you could walk with Tahoma? He's the safest man in town," he added in a rush, as though offering reassurance he felt deep in his bones. Tahoma didn't react to the praise, but Eleanor noticed the faintest softening of his jaw, a quiet acknowledgement of a bond he shared with the child. A man trusted by children, she thought, is a man worth trusting. Sam ran back inside, leaving them once more in the hush of falling snow. Eleanor looked at Tahoma, her breath forming small clouds between them. "Do you do this often?" she asked. "Help strangers?" "Not often," he said. "Only those who look like they're carrying too much alone." Something in her chest trembled. He had seen her, truly seen her, in a way Nathaniel never had even through months of letters. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the wind touch her face like an old friend. Then she gave the smallest nod. "All right. I'll go with you." Tahoma did not smile, but something in his expression loosened, as though her acceptance eased a tension he had been holding silently. Without a word, he lifted her suitcase, carrying it easily in one hand. He motioned toward the snowy road, and together they began to walk. The night deepened as they left the station behind. The snow thickened, but Tahoma's stride remained steady, his boots cutting clear paths Eleanor could follow without sinking. He slowed his pace slightly, ensuring she did not struggle to keep up. The gesture, so simple, so thoughtful, warmed her in places untouched by winter. The town's lights glowed faintly in the distance, muffled by falling snow. Voices drifted from saloons and homes, though none reached the quiet path they walked. Eleanor observed the gentle sway of lanterns outside doorways, the smoke rising from chimneys like tired sighs. She wondered if any of these warm windows had a place for her. But none felt as safe as this silent walk beside a man she had known only minutes. Tahoma spoke little. But now and then he pointed out where the road dipped, or where ice hid beneath fresh powder. Each word was shaped by a voice grounded in patience. After a while he asked, softly, "Why did you come so far?" Eleanor hesitated. It seemed unfair that his first question should touch so tender a wound. But something in his presence invited honesty. "Nathaniel wrote to me," she said. "He made me believe that I might have a place here." Tahoma's silence was not empty. It held thought, consideration, not judgment. "Many men write things they do not live," he finally said. Her breath hitched, a thread of pain pulling inside her. "Yes." They walked in silence for several slow breaths. Then she asked, quietly, "Do you think the town will judge me?" He turned his head slightly. Eleanor could not see his expression clearly in the dim light, but she felt him study her with a depth that made the snowy darkness feel less cold. "The town will talk," he said. "But talking is wind. It passes. You endure." She did not know why those words struck so deeply, but they steadied her. The path sloped downward toward a darker stretch of woods, the trees heavy with snow, their branches bending like old backs under winter's weight. Tahoma's cabin lay hidden somewhere beyond, though he did not say how far. A flicker of unease stirred in Eleanor's stomach, not because she feared him, but because the unknown pressed close on all sides. Yet each step felt guided by something gentler than fear, something like trust, still fragile, still new. A wind gust swept through the trees, scattering snow across their path. Eleanor gasped as the cold bit at her cheeks, and Tahoma instinctively moved closer, shielding her from the worst of it. His coat brushed hers, and the heat radiating from his body startled her with its intensity. It had been so long since anyone had stood between her and hardship. "The storm is coming faster than I thought," he murmured. They quickened their pace. At last, the forest opened onto a clearing where a single cabin stood, its windows glowing with warm firelight. Smoke curled from the chimney in soft spirals, welcoming and bright against the night. Relief washed through Eleanor so suddenly her knees nearly weakened. Tahoma stepped ahead to push open the heavy wooden door. Warmth spilled out, gentle and golden. But before she could step inside, a sudden sound echoed from the trees behind them, a deep, distant rustling, too heavy to be wind, too deliberate to be animal. Tahoma stiffened, turning his head sharply toward the darkness. Eleanor froze, breath caught. He set her suitcase down slowly, muscles tightening beneath his coat. "Stay by the door," he said, voice low but steady. And as the snow glowed faintly under the cabin's light, something moved in the forest beyond. Something that made Tahoma's calm eyes narrow, as though the night had just shifted into a warning. Night pressed close around them, thick with the hush of snowfall and the faint rustle that had stirred Tahoma's instincts. Eleanor remained near the open cabin door, fingers curled on the frame, the warmth at her back and the cold forest breathing before her. Tahoma moved with deliberate calm, stepping into the snow a few paces, and tilting his head as if listening to a language hidden within the trees. His stillness soothed her more than words could. After a long breath, the forest settled. Only wind. Only branches shifting under winter's weight. Nothing more. Tahoma's posture softened. He returned to her, lifting her suitcase once more, and guided her gently inside. The cabin swallowed her in a rush of warmth, the earthy scent of pine logs, the low crackle of a steady fire, the faint hint of herbs drying near the rafters. The room was simple yet alive. A sturdy table, a woven blanket draped over a wooden chair, shelves lined with tools and small carved shapes that caught flickers of firelight. The home felt like a place where silence meant peace, not loneliness. Tahoma set her suitcase near the hearth and removed his coat, shaking snow from the fur. His movements were slow, respectful, as though careful not to disturb the air around her. Eleanor stepped out of her damp gloves, hesitating before the flames. Her hands, stiff with cold and frailty she despised showing, trembled more than she wished. Without a word, Tahoma took a metal kettle from a hook, filled it with water from a wooden bucket, and set it near the fire. The gesture was simple, but the kindness in it pierced her deeper than Nathaniel's rejection had. She sank into the nearby chair, letting heat seep gradually into her bones. She watched Tahoma from the corner of her eye, not cautious, just curious. He moved like someone who held each moment softly, never rushing, never forcing. A man carved from steadiness. "Thank you," she murmured, unsure if it was enough. Tahoma glanced her way. "Warmth belongs to all," he said, not favoring her with pity, but recognizing her need as natural, human. The kettle soon began to hiss, soft curls of steam twisting upward. He poured the hot water into a clay cup, adding crushed leaves from a small pouch. When he handed it to her, his fingers brushed hers only briefly, yet the touch lingered like an ember on her skin. She felt a pulse of warmth spread through her, unexpected and unsettling. She sipped the tea, earthy, slightly bitter, grounding. For several minutes, they let the quiet breathe around them. Outside, the storm thickened, flakes tapping gently against the window. Eleanor felt the weight of the day unspool slowly, though the ache of rejection still pulsed under every breath. She set the cup down, fingers resting lightly on the handle. "May I ask your name?" He sat across from her, in the glow of the hearth. "Tahoma," he said simply. "And you came here from the east?" "Far east." Eleanor nodded. "Virginia. A long way to discover I was not what a man expected." Her voice dipped, not bitter, just weary. Tahoma studied her, his gaze steady. "Expectation is a small door. Hearts do not fit through it." The quiet conviction in his tone made her eyes sting. She looked down at her lap. "I suppose I should have known. I've lived more years than many women here. I should not be surprised he wanted someone." Tahoma waited, letting her choose the words. "Someone younger," she finished. Someone easier for the world to praise. I thought, she paused, perhaps a woman is still allowed to hope at 50. Hope does not keep age, Tahoma said. It visits who needs it. The room glowed warmer, though perhaps it was her heart loosening, thread by fragile thread. She watched the fire for a while, its orange light dancing across her silver hair. I am ashamed of how much it hurt, she admitted. A single nod. Hurt shows the truth of what mattered. Eleanor exhaled, long and slow. She felt older than she ever had, yet strangely seen in a way that softened the years rather than sharpened them. Across the room, Tahoma leaned back slightly, and she noticed the carved wooden shapes on the shelf, small animals, a few faces, and one figure that looked like a woman with long flowing hair.
Did you make those?
She asked. He gave a quiet nod. The forest offers pieces that wish for new forms. They're beautiful. He accepted the compliment with humble silence. After a moment, he spoke again. You do not need to decide anything tonight. Rest first. Let tomorrow find you. Something in her chest eased. She had been preparing herself for a night of fear, for the sting of humiliation to follow her into dreams. Instead she found herself wrapped in gentleness, sheltered not by promises but by presence. The fire crackled softly, sending amber flickers across the floorboards. Tell me, she said quietly, a sudden courage rising in her, do you live here alone? Yes. The word carried a weight she recognized too well. She lowered her gaze. Loneliness was a language she spoke fluently. He continued, after a silence that felt like a shared breath. My people are scattered. Some moved south. Some married into towns. Some, he paused, did not survive the years. Eleanor felt a thread of sorrow weave between them. I'm sorry, she whispered. Tahoma's expression did not collapse into grief or shadow. It remained calm, like a river that had learned to carry loss below its surface without losing its flow. Pain is part of the land, he said. But so is healing. The fire snapped softly, sending a tiny spark upward. Eleanor's eyes softened. She realized she had not spoken this openly with anyone in years. Nathaniel had never heard her like this. He had only read her surface, the polite parts. Tahoma saw the hidden chapters. A soft knock echoed from the door. Eleanor stiffened, startled. Tahoma rose smoothly, crossing the cabin in 2 long strides. He opened it cautiously. Snow swirled in, carried by a gust of wind. In the doorway stood Sheriff Lyndon Rowe, collar dusted white, breath puffing in steady clouds. Evening, Tahoma, the sheriff said, though his gaze slid past him to Eleanor. Ma'am. Eleanor straightened, unsure if she had done something wrong. The sheriff removed his hat. Word traveled fast after Nathaniel left the station, he said. Folks are talking. Saying you disappeared into the storm with Tahoma here. Wanted to make sure you were safe. The implication hung in the air like a bitter draft. Eleanor felt her face warm, not with fear, but with humiliation's familiar sting. Tahoma's posture tightened slightly, though his voice remained calm. She is safe. Lyndon nodded, though concern flickered in his eyes, not for her safety, but for the words already circulating through town. Rumors gather quick in winter nights. Eleanor clasped her hands, pulse quickening. She did not want Tahoma's name tangled in the town's cruel whispers. She did not want him judged for offering kindness she desperately needed. The sheriff hesitated, then added, If you wish, ma'am, I can escort you to the inn. Eleanor opened her mouth to respond. But Tahoma looked at her then, his eyes steady, offering neither pressure nor escape. Only choice. And in that quiet moment, she realized something terrifyingly beautiful. The world might judge her no matter where she went. But Tahoma's worry was not for himself. It was for how easily she might slip back into the loneliness she'd carried for decades. Her next words hovered on her tongue, trembling between past and possibility. Rumor travels faster than any horse, and by morning it had galloped through every crooked alley and frosted porch in town. Eleanor felt at the moment she stepped outside Tahoma's cabin, the winter air carrying faint echoes of voices that did not belong to wind. She had slept little. Not because the cabin was uncomfortable, the opposite. Its warmth had settled around her like a long-forgotten embrace. But rest could not hush the thoughts that circled her mind. The sheriff's warning, the town's judgment, and the heavy truth that she had become a story in the mouths of strangers once again. Tahoma met her at the door, his hair damp from melting snow, his breath steady despite the cold. He studied her face, seeing the strain threading through her expression. "The town whispers?" he asked softly. She nodded. "I shouldn't have brought trouble to your doorstep." "You didn't," he said. "Trouble walked on its own feet." But Eleanor felt the guilt anyway, creeping like frost along the edges of her heart. They walked toward town together, snow crunching beneath their boots. The morning sky was pale and wide, painted with thin streaks of sunlight that tried to warm the land, but couldn't quite penetrate the winter's firm grip. Tahoma walked beside her without rushing, without speaking unless the silence asked for words. His presence steadied her, though she wished it didn't so powerfully. The first eyes met them before they reached the main road. Two women carrying firewood paused mid-step, gazes narrowing as they took in Eleanor's silver hair, her worn coat, Tahoma's towering form beside her. One whispered. The other pressed her lips together in a disapproving line. Eleanor's chest tightened. She forced herself to keep walking, though each judgmental glance felt like a pebble thrown at her ribs. Tahoma noticed but did not react. His stride never faltered. His shoulders remained open, not defensive. He absorbed the world without letting it change the quiet dignity of his movements. At the general store, Nathaniel Briggs stood on the porch, sweeping snow off the steps though his eyes were fixed on them. He froze when they drew closer, guilt flickering briefly across his face before pride swallowed it. Eleanor waited for him to speak, to offer some word of apology, but he only tightened his grip on the broom. "Morning," he muttered, not meeting her eyes. Tahoma stopped, his gaze landing on the man who had invited Eleanor across states only to reject her like a misdelivered package. "Morning," Tahoma replied, voice calm but grounded with a weight that made Nathaniel's shoulders hunch. Eleanor stepped forward before tension could build. "I appreciate your concern last night, Nathaniel. But I don't need anything from you now." Nathaniel flinched slightly, not from cruelty in her tone, but from its clarity. He nodded stiffly and stepped aside, creating distance as though her presence exposed some meekness he preferred hidden. As Eleanor and Tahoma continued through town, the murmurs followed them. A hush fell around each cluster of people they passed. Men lingering outside the blacksmith shop, women waiting for bread from the bakery, children whispering as though witnessing something scandalous and rare. The sight of an older white woman walking beside a young Apache man was a tale the town didn't know where to place, so it grasped for the easiest angle: suspicion. Eleanor's cheeks burned despite the cold. She kept her eyes forward, her breath shallow. Tahoma leaned in slightly. "Their talk is only noise. It cannot decide who you are. But it can decide who they think you are," she whispered. "And I don't want that for you." Her words surprised even herself. She had known him barely a day, yet the thought of harming his standing unsettled her more than any insult directed at her. He didn't respond immediately, but the softness in his gaze deepened, like the hint of a sunrise hidden behind clouded mountains. At the sheriff's office, Lyndon Rowe stood outside, his hat tilted against the wind. He offered a nod to both of them. "Morning, Eleanor." "Tahoma." "Sheriff," Tahoma replied. "I've heard some noise around town," Lyndon said, choosing his words with care. "Folks aren't used to seeing someone taken in so quickly. People assume things when they don't know the truth." Eleanor felt heaviness coil in her chest. "And what truth do they think they know?" Lyndon sighed. "The kind that favors gossip over sense. I'd advise you both to keep close, keep steady. Rumors sting most when you stop moving." Tahoma placed a hand on Eleanor's suitcase handle, where she carried it now. "She's safe," he said. "That's the only truth that matters." The sheriff watched them for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll keep an ear out. Don't let their talk change your steps." They thanked him and moved on. At the edge of town, Eleanor paused beside a frozen creek, breath clouding in small bursts. Tahoma waited, giving her space. The creek was still, a ribbon of glass reflecting the pale sun. She stared at it, seeing herself mirrored back, older, weathered, yet still standing. "I don't know what to do," she admitted. "I don't want to run from whispers. But I also don't want to cause you pain." Tahoma stepped closer, not touching her, but offering his calm like an outstretched hand. Pain is something I know. But this is not pain. This is a choice. A fragile warmth bloomed in her chest, surprising her with its intensity. He continued, voice quiet. When you stood on the platform last night, you looked like someone who had been carrying solitude for miles. I didn't take you in out of duty. I took you in because you are human. Because kindness is a path I walk by choice. She swallowed, eyes shining. And if the town turns against you for that? Tahoma looked toward the distant rooftops, snow drifting across them like a soft veil. Then let them. I do not bend for voices that do not know my heart. Eleanor's breath caught. She turned away briefly, overwhelmed by the gentle certainty in his words. He did not offer her promises, only truth. And somehow, that meant more. They walked back toward the cabin as flakes thickened, falling in swirling ribbons across the path. Eleanor felt the day's weight settling in her bones, but also something else, a flicker of belonging, faint yet unmistakably alive. When the cabin came into view, she exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. But as they approached, she noticed footprints near the door. Fresh ones, pressed deep into the snow. Not hers. Not Tahoma's. They led from the woods to the doorstep, then back again. Tahoma saw them at the same moment. His face shifted. Not fear, not anger, but alertness sharpened to a blade. Someone was here, he murmured. Eleanor felt the world tighten around her. The storm suddenly quieter, the forest suddenly too still. Tahoma stepped ahead, placing himself between her and the dark tree line. The air thickened, cold enough to sting her lungs. He studied the shadows, every muscle drawn like a bowstring. Then he looked back at her, voice soft but urgent. Eleanor. Whoever came wasn't from town. And in that single breath, her fear twisted into something new. Not of judgment. Not of whispers. But of danger she had unknowingly walked into. Danger that had now stepped brazenly toward the very place she felt safest. Snow drifted in slow spirals as an uneasy quiet settled over the clearing, wrapping the cabin in a thin veil of dread. Eleanor felt her pulse flutter as Tahoma stepped past the doorway, each measured stride cutting into the snow like he was reading a language written on the ground. The footprints leading toward the woods were wide, heavy, deliberate, made by someone who had not approached with kindness in mind. Stay close to the light, he murmured without turning, and she obeyed, hovering near the threshold where warmth brushed her back and winter breathed at her front. She watched him crouch, fingertips grazing the edge of a print. His expression remained composed, but a tension gathered across his shoulders, subtle as the tightening of a drumskin. These tracks weren't made long ago, he said quietly. An hour, perhaps less. Eleanor wrapped her arms around herself. Her voice came out thin. Do you think they meant harm? He rose slowly, glancing toward the woods. Someone was watching us. But they left when I stepped outside. The idea of unseen eyes stirred something deep and cold within her, a fear sharpened by the vulnerability of her new life. For a moment she wished she could fold herself into safety, wished she could be someone braver or stronger. But beneath her fear was something else, an unwillingness to be a burden on this man who had shown her only steadiness. Tahoma turned to her, reading her turmoil with unnerving ease. You did nothing to bring danger here. Do not carry blame that is not yours. His words steadied her breath, though unease still coiled like smoke in her chest. Inside, the fire crackled steadily. Tahoma shut the door behind them, but not fully, just enough to keep the cold at bay while allowing the night's sounds to slip through. He moved to the window, pulling the curtain aside just enough to peer through. Eleanor watched him, her heart folding with quiet ache. You're worried, she said softly. He didn't deny it. Worry is a thing carried in many ways. Mine sits quiet until danger stirs it. She stepped closer, though she wasn't sure where her courage came from. I don't want you harmed because of me. Tahoma turned then, his gaze steady as the mountain his name belonged to. You have brought me no harm, Eleanor. You have given this place something it has missed for a long time. A warmth rose in her chest, unexpected and fragile. She felt the fire's glow settle into her bones, grounding her even as the storm outside thickened. For several minutes they stood in soft silence, the cabin holding them like cupped hands. Eleanor listened to the kettle hum, listened to her own breath slowly steady, listened to the faint rustle of snow against the window. At last she spoke. "Tahoma, why help me? Truly?" He met her gaze without flinching, as if the answer had been waiting behind his ribs for years. "Because I know what it is to be judged by eyes that do not see you. Because I know what it means to walk alone carrying a weight no one else recognizes." Her throat tightened. She sank into the nearest chair, her strength trembling under the rawness of his honesty. "I've spent years being unseen, invisible until someone needed me for something small. And when they didn't..." Her voice broke, not loudly, but like a leaf folding under frost. Tahoma crossed the room in 3 slow steps. He knelt beside her, his presence settling over her like a blanket of quiet earth. "You are not invisible to me." Those words unraveled her. She felt tears warm her cheeks before she could stop them. She pressed a hand to her mouth, ashamed of how easily her emotions spilled. But Tahoma did not look away. He watched her with the stillness of a man who knew how to hold pain without fearing it. He reached out, not touching her cheeks, not wiping her tears, just placing his hand palm up on her knee, offering contact only if she wished to take it. Eleanor hesitated for a single breath, then laid her trembling fingers into his waiting hand. His warmth flooded her, steady and grounding. He inhaled slowly, as if bracing his heart for something long overdue. "Eleanor, I need you to know something." Her pulse skittered. Tahoma's voice deepened, softened, took on a gravity that made the air between them thrum. "When you walked into the snow last night, I saw not a woman rejected, but a woman carrying a lifetime of unspoken strength. Your age does not dim you. It reveals you. You are not too old. You are not too late. You are not a burden to be carried." He leaned closer, his breath warm against the cold edges of her grief. "I want you in my life because I see you. Because I respect you. Because your presence fills the silence of this cabin with something I did not know I missed." Her breath stuttered, a tremor running through her. Tahoma continued, voice low and sure. "Come with me, not because you need shelter. Come because I want you beside me. Come because I..." He paused, gathering the courage of a man who spoke rarely but meant every word. "I love you." The world narrowed to the warmth of his hand, and the fire's soft crackle. Eleanor felt her heart bloom in her chest, fragile yet fiercely alive, as if winter itself bowed beneath the weight of this truth. Tears fell freely, not from sorrow but release, years of longing dissolving in one steady confession. She leaned forward, her forehead resting lightly against his, her voice trembling but firm. "Tahoma, I have never been chosen this way. Never been wanted for my soul, rather than what I could provide. You are wanted," he whispered. "By me." The kettle whistled, sharp and bright, breaking the stillness. Eleanor lifted her head, laughter softening her tears. The room felt lighter, the storm outside quieter, the air inside filled with something warm and irrevocably binding. But as Tahoma rose to fetch the kettle, a distant thud echoed from the forest, deep, heavy, unnatural. The cabin trembled just slightly under the vibration. Eleanor froze, her breath catching. Tahoma's eyes sharpened. He stepped toward the door, muscles taut. "That sound," he murmured, "was not the wind." And as another thud rolled through the frozen night, closer this time, Eleanor realized the danger that had approached the cabin earlier had not gone far, and had returned with purpose.